Hi. So this is Finding Space for Holy in Stamina. In our crazy, busy lives, we're trying to find Jesus. There are days and many days where it just requires our stamina to say, I'm in it. I'm following the way of Jesus. I have stamina to get through everything. That's part of finding space for holy. We say here an awful lot at Larger Story Church. We are dependent on a Savior who is not us. And we also say, a life of faith is long obedience in the same direction. That's actually a Eugene Peterson quote, yet we say it an awful lot here. And both of those require stamina. Because faith has risk associated to it. That is part of the very word faith. We trust God as we do not control the outcome that God gives us. So all of our good works do not control the outcome. All of our disciplined ways, good, but they still do not control the outcome. We stay in this life making decisions of long obedience in the same direction. I could have entitled this message Perseverance or Tenacity or Resilience, Endurance, Grit, or Persistence. All of those are really great words and I might use them throughout this message. But I chose the word stamina because it sounded muscly. It sounded tough. I also really like the word grit here because that sounds so tough and dirty and gritty. And sometimes our faith just requires our decisions of grit, our decisions of stamina, our decisions to stay in and make those long obedience, those decisions of long obedience in the same direction, where there are days we just have to tough it out. As I've said before, I say this often in this church. Oh, by the way, I'm Pastor Brenda. I'm pastor of this church. Glad to meet you here in this space. And I say this also often in our church. Hope has bloody fists. In finding space for holy, there are days we're just going to have stamina and muscle our way through sometimes. Not in our own power, because we just believe in this larger story of God. So we're gonna wrap back to that. But first, God designed us to develop over time. Like all of our development is an evolving growth development. It wasn't this case, we would have been born adults. We would have been born wholly developed. We would have been formed adults with a robust faith and a mature trust already intact. And yet, God has designed us to be born as vulnerable babies. And from this point, when we're at our most vulnerable, we get to grow and mature and grow our trust all along the way. Just like Jesus was born as a vulnerable baby to grow and experience all of this for us. This includes learning through our struggles. This includes having that stamina. This means also learning through our failures. This means that in the midst of disappointment and what it truly means to trust Jesus, we need stamina. We are not intended to stay as babies. And that comes with our faith too. We get to grow in our faith, have the stamina and this is decisions that we make, by the way, to grow in our faith. Will you have the stamina to show up with your faith every day and grow? Because some of us have taken off days of our faith, weeks of our faith, and years of our faith. Because we just didn't have the stamina to stay in it. But will you stay in the daily of this and have that stamina? So our first question, and I hope you gather here with your roommates or your small group or as a family around the dinner table or something. Your first question to ask each other is, what do our failures teach us? Have that conversation. I'll be right here. So we had the same question, same conversation when we meet together live through Zoom on Friday nights. Friday nights, yes, for church. And probably one of the biggest aha moments that I didn't have here in my notes is that we discussed how our faith is like trial and error. And it's designed that way. Like, it's not this perfect progression, but it's full of trial and error. And that requires our stamina to stick to it. It's not, in a world full of perfectionism, we get this faith of trial and error, and it's the way it really is. How often do you hear this message of grace? But our failures bring us so much learning, so much growth, it teaches us so much stamina. Remember this about failure, because do not fear it. We as Christians, we're not exempt from failure. Again, our faith is made up of trial and error. Failure is survivable and temporary. Failure teaches problem solving and coping skills. Failure teaches the joy of overcoming. Failure is a task. It is not a definer of a person. Failure means you tried because you believe you are worthy to try. Perfectionism, we talked about this just for a moment, is you striving to be perfect so that you and only you can shame you. Perfectionism is all about shame. Is you may think you've got this perfect Christian life that you're really striving hard to have, and you're not going trial and error. You are just striving so hard and not finding space for holy in that, by the way. That is all about shame. And with our stamina, we can recognize this freedom. Our faith is really trial and error, and that is where the grace comes in. There's a book I recommend you read for this whole series. It's just one book. It's called Lowly and Gently by Dane Ortlund. It's all about this theme verse we have, Matthew 11, 28 through 30. And this one quote from page 78 is so beautiful about this trial and error faith. It's the most counteractive aspect of Christianity, that we are declared right with God, not once we begin to get our act together, but once we collapse into honest acknowledgement that we never will. Isn't that amazing? With a trial and error kind of faith, with one that our stamina, we stick to it, with the highs and the lows and the failures and the learning and the overcoming, with that tenacity, that stamina to stick to it, that we are made right with God when we realize we fail. This is our dependency on a Savior. In a world that asks for perfectionism, and this is the culture of the moment, this is our religion of enoughness. There's a whole thought how our brains need a religion to order our world. And when we don't need a Savior, we succumb to this religion of enoughness, which drives us to perfectionism and consumerism and striving. And we're missing these moments of holy in it. And we're also missing this grace that says, the very moment we don't have our act together and we recognize our dependency on a Savior, that is when we are made right in God. It's a grace sometimes we don't understand, right? But we can control our striving. We can control our perfectionism. We can control that work for enoughness. But to have a dependency on a Savior who is not us, this is where grace comes in. And we actually find it to be very beautiful. So will you have the stamina to pick up this yoke that Jesus offers us and realize that it is rest for us in the daily grind? So here our theme verse we've said every week through the series. Matthew 11, 28 through 30. Then Jesus said, "Come to me, all of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Let me teach you, because I am humble and gentle at heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy to bear, and the burden I give you is light. This daily grind that requires our stamina is so daily. And at times it is uncomfortable, and at times it is even painful. We don't walk this daily grind alone. This burden, this yoke, is also carried by Jesus. And he says to us in his heart of love, that's lowly and gentle towards us. Let me teach you, because I am humble and gentle at heart, and you will find rest for your souls. In this stamina, or trial and error faith, there's actually rest for your soul. So some truth about pain and life. We're not exempt from pain, even as Christians. And God has hardwired us for pain. We are hardwired to overcome. And this truth is throughout the Bible, but there's this progression of growth in Romans 5:3-5. I'm going to read this to you and see this progression. We can rejoice too when we run into problems and trials, for we know that they help us to develop endurance. And endurance develops strength of character, and character strengthens our confident hope of salvation. And this hope will not lead to disappointment, for we know how dearly God loves us, because he has given us the Holy Spirit to fill our hearts with his love. So let's just begin, the beginning of this progression. And I don't know about this rejoicing about our pains and sufferings, but yet, those of us who have a long faith of obedience in the same direction, we know there's some joy in that pain. We get to experience both. And they both help us to produce endurance in our life, stamina, this grit, this muscliness. So second question for you to have with conversation with your people. How does enduring a painful life circumstance build endurance? Have that conversation. I'll wait right here. Did you just have a wonderful conversation with that question? Because isn't it wonderful, beautiful to realize that we're hardwired to overcome pain, and that we get pain and we can rejoice in our pain, because there's moments where we just laugh and feel that, and that produces endurance. And what that does to our story and to this view of his larger story, God, isn't that just wonderful? So we continue on with this thought in this progression from Romans 5, that this kind of perseverance, what we've learned through our pain, our temporary situations, because they always are temporary, these circumstances where God helps us overcome, and we learn so much, and we rewire our brains. The Lead Your Brain series about this, how we call it in our church myelinating these new memories of how God is faithful to you. That builds character in you. This is the progression. And then that character in you builds hope that does not lead to disappointment. That is right there in Romans 5. Isn't that an interesting way to describe hope? Because so often hope has led to disappointment, right? But in this progression, when you have had stamina and you've seen how God is close to you in the pain, and how God is faithful to you in the pain, and you've had to learn this through your stamina, through your endurance, and you've learned this from other people's stories who've shared the same thing, this builds your character, which then builds your hope, which does not lead to disappointment. And again, as I say here often in this church, hope has bloody fists from fighting forward. Hope is your plan B and your plan C and your plan D, because you know that God is with you in it, and you are worthy to have something good happen to you. And if that plan A has blown up and changed, you're going to hang in there with your endurance, because you have character that is growing in this trial and error kind of faith. And then you have this hope that does not lead to disappointment. Zechariah 4:10 says, Do not despise these small beginnings, for the Lord rejoices to see the work begin. Your small, slow, and imperfect progress is still progress. Your small, slow, and imperfect faith is still faith. Your small, slow start is still a start. So be kind to yourself about your imperfect progress. This is why we will talk so much about grace. Because we begin right with God. We begin made right with God. That's our identity. And now we're just maturing into who we already are. Your stamina is your beauty and your strength. And I'm going to say, this is a you decision. You can't offload this to God. It's not ethereal. This is you showing up day after day and hanging in there with your faith, trusting in those promises, whether you believe them or not on that day. This is you living out the Psalms and finding out the Psalms to be true in your life. And that hurts sometimes and it's confusing at times, but you're staying in it. You're staying, this is a you decision in it. So stamina is a part of another part of Catholic theology called the Rules of St. Benedict. And I bring this up because I want to tie in some of the ancient history of the Christian faith. As I say, we're part of this larger story that's 2,000 years old. And in the Rules of St. Benedict, there's a rule called the vow of stability. And that's what our stamina is. This rule actually says, we do accept our limits because we cannot sustain a high level of engagement or enthusiasm 100% of the time. We're to remain more faithful to our daily tasks. This also ties into a Celestian spirituality. I've been sharing about this ancient Catholic theology throughout this entire series. Celestian spirituality is when you practice the little virtues daily, and when it comes time when you need a big virtue like bravery, you can do it because you've been practicing the little virtues, so you're ready to do it. But you also know that those big virtue moments, they're great stories. There's a lot of emotions involved in it, an emotional high often. You can't sustain your life like that. You need to be living in the daily vow of stability, practicing those little virtues so that you can have these great big virtue moments, these great big stories where God shows up personally, these great miracles, these stories that really wow us, these testimonies, but they don't come unless you're living day to day in stability. And that stability often means being in a stable relationship with others in your life. It's, again, more St. Benedict stuff, staying longer because there is no way to discern God's will together without commitment to sit long together in the first place. When you sit long together with certain people in your life, with a church family maybe, or your small group, these are the people that can speak into your life because you have that stamina together, that stability of sitting long together. And you can discern appropriate ways to be Christian. You can grow this faith of trial and error when you sit long with people through time, testing, and patience with one another. All of a sudden, you can see your faith rightly and correctly, and you actually find moments of holy together with this. Stability means staying put, learning to live in Christ with that sometimes messy community. And sometimes we just need stamina just to deal with people in that messy Christian community, right? And also, stamina is asking others to pray for you when you can't pray for yourself. There are moments when life hits you, and it hits you hard, and you can't pray any longer. True here. And when you are staying long with people in this vow of stability, these are the people you trust who will pray for you on your behalf. So in our world full of so many choices, what do? When we don't like something, we look for something new because we can. But what if we'll sit still just a bit longer? What if? And then what a growing faith really looks like. Again, I want to mention this trial and error faith that we talked about in our church full of long and young Christians. They're the ones that came up with that. It was a beautiful time. And I want to share this Beth Moore quote, the great Bible teacher, Beth Moore. By the way, we're going to do our Beth Moore study on Philippians coming up here. Please check our website and join us on that. But this is from her book, Chasing Vines, page 228. This is her quote, again from the great Bible teacher. Oh, you could try to tell someone younger in the faith what steps you took. You could post a blog about it. You could do an effective Q&A on the topic. Perhaps you could even write a decent book about it. But deep in your heart, you know that much of the time, you really had no idea what you were doing. This is a faith of imperfect progress. And in hindsight, you put it all together, but in the middle of doing it, you have no idea what you're doing. But you're choosing stamina. You're choosing the vow of stability. And day by day, and then one of these days, or every other day, or every day, you get a moment of holy in the midst of your stamina. So our app for the week is the Pause app. You can find this in your app store. We've mentioned this 1 week ago. I'm mentioning it again. And inside the Pause app, there is a plan called Resilient. It's a 35-day plan. So I'm asking you to have some stamina to make a daily decision for 35 days to follow this plan. It's about 10 minutes. It is a pause for silence. There's words spoken over you, and it is a progression of thought. And over the 35 days, it goes from shallow to deep. And if 35 days doesn't lead your brain, I challenge you to pick that up. Our growing slow habit is to download that one worship song that makes your heart move. Find some space, play that song, and dance to it. This is all about moving your body. There's actually space for holy when you move your body. And there's that one song that just means so much to you, then dance to it and bring holy into that moment. Take a 5 good minutes to dance to your favorite song. And find that moment of holy. And our breath prayer for the week, you'll find it located here in our notes. A breath prayer means we breathe in and then we breathe out. Breathe in. I don't have to pretend. God is not far from me. I don't have to pretend. God is not far from me. I don't have to pretend. God is not far from me. I don't have to pretend. God is not far from me. Can you see how praying that breath prayer in high stress times, in quiet moment times, in your car, whatever it is, you can see how that can lead your brain, help you see the context of the situation, help give you the stamina to make it through. So this is my benediction to you. May you make the choice of stamina, of grit, of perseverance, of tenacity, of persistence, of endurance. May you daily make these decisions. And then may you be surprised at the moments of holy. Your faith of trial and error, your faith of imperfect progress will bring to you. There is grace for you every day. Amen. May I see you again.